Hello everyone, my name is Jen and welcome to the Book Refuge. And wow, it's been an age since I was filming. Like, it's been a whole week because I just got back from my trip to Wanderlust. If you haven't watched that vlog already, I highly recommend it. Also, my mic was giving me problems working with this new with my new phone, and I think I've got it figured out. But we're gonna dive in. Today, I'm bringing you a video that is sponsored by my channel members. Yes, I remember to mention at the beginning of the video this time. And yes, I have been a little bit lax on that lately, but my channel members are extremely understanding. This is a perk that comes with the Romance Renegade level and above. If you'd like to check out my channel memberships, those are always linked down below, or you can just check out the join button. I have these levels. They're a little bit more affordable than some of my patron levels, but if you want to support the channel and support what I do here, you can check those out. And the video that they voted on is one that was recommended also by a viewer, because I do have a video recommendation form or request that's also always in my list. And when I'm going to do like channel sponsored videos, I tend to just pick some ideas off that list and put them in a poll for everybody. And this is one that has come up a couple of times. And I think part of the reason I was like hesitant is that putting this list together, I feel like I don't have any huge opinion changes. That's the thing. Because if I really love a book, then I've usually read it a few times and it just confirms how I feel about it. And if it's a book that I don't love that much, I don't reread it, so my opinion doesn't change, if that makes sense. And so on this list, there's actually only like 2 or 3 that I reread and my opinion went down. Also, I do want to put it out there that I lost my voice on Saturday, so I may need to take some frequent drinks. I'm going to be filming quite a few videos in a row today, and my throat, we'll see how it goes. Anyway, so I only have a couple that my opinion has changed for the worst. Most of these are books that over time my opinion has just grown of them, so if that makes sense. So I'm just going to go through these and tell you, this might not be as in-depth of a discussion as you think, but you know, I'll give you my initial thoughts and then what I think now. That's all we can hope for one like this, and hopefully you enjoy this. And if you are enjoying the content you see here, make sure you like this video, subscribe to my channel. I put up videos 3 to 4 days a week, including weekly wrap-ups where I talk about every single book that I read. So, you know, if I make one of these videos in the future, you'll actually be able to go back and see what my initial thoughts were and see how they changed. So there you go. All right, I didn't put these in any specific like chronological order. I just went through, you know, my previously read books. So the first one we're going to talk about is actually Annie's Song by Katherine Anderson. And this is a book that in 2021 I gave 6 stars. I read this all in one sitting originally, actually on ebook, and then it had been recommended by a viewer. It was actually one of the first viewer recs that I read. I was very interested in what this book was about, and then I ended up ordering it from Thrift Books, and I got lucky because I got one with this gorgeous step back, and also that wasn't a library pick, so I got like an original. So this book is about a girl named Annie Trimble, and she is deaf, but people don't know she's deaf. They think she is daft and has the mind of a child, and in some ways she kind of does. And this book begins with her being raped. She gets raped by this horrible young man who just decides to have his way with her because he sees her down by the river and she's wearing this kind of like only a shift with not much else on because her parents just let her wander around, and he rapes her. Then this man's older brother, whose name is Alex Montgomery, he finds out what happens, and he is rightly so horrified, indignant, cannot believe that this young man that he raised, because he's been the guardian, you know, I mean, this young man isn't a child anymore, but he is, I think, in his like early 20s, and Alex had basically raised him since their parents died, and he's horrified. So he goes to speak to Annie's parents. They are like, we want to keep this a secret. We don't want men to think they'll be able to take advantage of our daughter because they, you know, we're not going to you know, we don't want her to be shamed by it, blah, blah, blah. So basically her parents make a bunch of fucking excuses. It's horrible. And Alex is like, well, if there is a baby, let me know, because I would provide for my niece or nephew. Like, I would do that. And they'd be like, we don't even want to think about it. Well, Annie ends up being pregnant. Alex ends up getting her parents to agree to let Annie come and stay with him until the baby is born, and he's going to basically get a nurse for her and have her be taken care of, not explain what's happening to her, not help her understand what's going on. But for it to happen, he does marry her. She has no idea what's going on, and she gets brought to this house. And then through time, we see him begin to realize what's actually wrong with her, for him to realize the horrible things that she's been through, the way that her parents treated her, partially out of ignorance, but partially out of like willful ignorance. And we get to see them fall in love with each other. Now, I read this, like I said, on one sitting. It was so emotional. I sobbed through most of this book. And if you've been around a while, you know, books that make me cry, if they're making me cry with this kind of emotion, not with like, I hate the book so bad emotion, I rate them pretty highly. And I felt that way for a long time. And I still really do appreciate this book for what it was. This came out in 1993. It's definitely not perfect. It definitely has some wording and some scenarios that I feel like weren't done properly. Like, that's the biggest thing. Like, this is a case of an old school romance taking on a really sensitive topic and it getting kind of squeaky when it's looked at through this lens. Now, I still hold like old school romance to a certain standard. Like, I don't just let it pass just because it's old school. So that's why, like, I feel like a lot of things were still done well. But there are some ways that Katherine Anderson has Alex think about Annie that I know, like, I can just tell that by writing them, she's trying to show that he is, you know, looking at this through a broader lens and really trying to understand. But she also has him be attracted to Annie like way too early on. And when we reread this and talked about it for Rake Appreciation Society with my best friend Crystal, I mean, this book made her extremely uncomfortable and she didn't enjoy it, and it just felt really gross to her. And there were other reasons. I'm not trying to sum her up in a little bit. You can go check out that live show on her channel if you want more. But I do also like understand her opinion and opinion of a lot of other people who read it, and I understand the opinion of people who read this many years ago, and it holds a special place for them, because I do still believe in my heart that what Katherine Anderson was trying to do with this book was really bold and beautiful, and the statement she was making, and the just like Alex is the one who gives Annie a song. That's why it's called Annie's Song. He's trying to find ways to communicate with her. He's finding ways for them to be able to talk, for her to be able to live a full life. And she never would have had those if she hadn't have been raped by his brother. So it's this very, like, it's very uncomfortable, okay? It's very uncomfortable. If she had not been raped and gotten pregnant as a, like, I think she's 19, she's 17 or 19, I honestly can't remember. If that hadn't happened to her, she would have lived in a dark, quiet world her whole life, probably have ended up in an asylum when her parents died, because her siblings all live far away and they wouldn't have wanted to deal with her. And she would have, like, it would have, whatever, you know, it would have been horrible. But I'm talking way too long about these books, but I thought this video would be quick. But for me, like, when I reread it, some of the shine was taken off of it. That's why I don't always love to reread some that are my favorites. So I still hold this very close, and I'm not like diminishing it. I just, you know, when I started to compare it to other old schools and other books that do this sort of thing, I think I've seen it done better, but I still just, like, I love a lot about this. So it's now more of like a 4-star for me than a 6-star read for me. And that's why it didn't end up making it in my top 10 of that year, because it was so powerful, and I'll never forget this book, and I probably will still reread it again someday, at least the beautiful parts. But there was a lot Katherine Anderson was taking on with this book, and for the most part, I feel like she was successful. But I also don't discredit people who are like, ooh, yikes, because that's what a lot of old school does. It's yikes. Okay, we're going to go faster than that for some of these, because I don't have as much to say about some of them. So the next one that I changed my mind about in a, like, lesser way is actually Lessons in Corruption by Gianna Darling. And I'm actually feeling this way about a lot more of Gianna Darling's work. Like, I really appreciate her for what she does. She writes taboo. She writes it very sexy. She has very, like, her writing is very beautiful and gut-wrenching. But this one, surprisingly, I loved it so much the first time I read it, which this is an older woman. This is a student teacher. It's an 18-year-old King Garrow, who is the, you know, heir apparent to Daddy Zeus of the Fallen Men MC. And he, like, our heroine, she meets him, like, she sees him one time, and seeing him is what helps inspire her to get out of her bad marriage that she's in. And then she sees him again and has, like, almost a one-night stand with him. They don't quite have sex, but they do some other stuff. And she is like, wow, I'm loving this new life. And then when she goes to her first day of teaching, she discovers that he's in her advanced English class. And so she tries to put on the brakes, whereas he's like, hey, you're only 10 years older than me, and you're the woman that I want, and I'm going to go for it. So that setup's all great. The thing that was really disturbing for me upon reread is, so I reread this book this year for some patrons, picked this one to be annotated, and I was like, oh sweet, I haven't read this in years. And it's supposed to be taboo, but then there was also just some really icky behavior for a teacher for me, and I'm not talking about hooking up with one of her students, because that is the taboo you're getting into when you're reading a student teacher. There's a couple scenes. One, there's a scene where it's not the first time she's meeting his dad, but, like, there's a scenario where her family is trying to ambush her, and King is there, and King, like, calls his family for backup. And so Zeus comes, like, Zeus pretends to be the boyfriend, not King. But then after her family leaves, King takes her upstairs to her loft bedroom and fucks her while his sister and dad are just hanging out downstairs eating pie that she made. And then there's another time where she has, like, fucked up. She's, like, hurt his feelings. And to make amends during class, because they've hooked up during, like, detention or after school stuff before, right? That's one of the hot things you look forward to with a student teacher. But she calls him to the front to, like, discuss an essay he had to do, or to recite an essay. And he's sitting, like, facing the room, I think, and she's sitting on, like, her chair facing the desk, and she lifts up her skirt and finger fucks herself in the classroom with the other kids there. And I don't remember that when I read it the first time. And when it came upon me again, I was so horrified that, honestly, I would have DNF'd it if I wasn't annotating it for my patrons. And please, patrons who picked this one, like, I literally didn't remember that happened. I had blocked it out, obviously. Or I thought it happened during detention. But no, like, literally the rest of the class is working on essays, and she calls King up and she finger fucks herself so he can watch while there's kids behind her. And they're working on their projects, but you can't tell me that they don't hear her touching herself or, like, figure out something's going on while she's up there squirming on her chair. And I literally was like, Gianna, darling, what the fuck? There are underage children in this room while the teacher is finger fucking herself. Do I need to repeat it? Ick. Ick, ick, ick. So I think the first time I read this book, I'd given it a 4.5 or a 5, and it honestly went down to, like, a 2.5 just with that scene. Like, there was other stuff that didn't hold up as well, because this was the first book in the series too, so there's other things. But, like, I was so icked out. I was just dumbfounded. Like, I know things are taboo, but, like, those children didn't consent to have their teacher jilling off in the room with them. Like, it's disgusting. That's above, like, a taboo for me, okay? All right. Then we have 2 Sophie Larks that I've changed my opinion on, and now we're getting into some that they've changed for the better. And like I said, I'm going to switch back and forth between these, but I have 2 Sophie Larks to talk about. I've obviously read these books many times now, and some of them, my first impressions when I was binging my way through all of her books, I was like, didn't love it. And in fact, one of these that I'm about to show you is the first like review of mine she ever commented on, and I didn't leave a nice review because like I didn't know this lady. I was reading through her books and I was having an okay time, but then I came to this one and I was just like, meh, didn't know how I felt. And that's Savage Lover. Yes, I'm holding up the beautiful copy with Camille on the front. Sophie sent this to me because I wasn't able to get the book box, the Hello Lovely box at the time, and she signed it because she's amazing. And this one is Camille and Nero, and it's so funny. I love watching my friends binge this series because particularly when you get to books 3 and 4, like those are the two books I feel like people have the biggest disparity about. Like people either give this book like it's their favorite one or it's like a 2 or a 3 for them. It's just so funny how it goes, and I think it's because coming off of reading Stolen Air, which is in my opinion like still one of her strongest books, like I'm just saying it's simple but it's amazing. And so if you really loved that book, this one's kind of a dip, and if you were just like it's Beauty and the Beast retelling, been there, been around, this one is like a heist novel, and there is like the heroine's a mechanic, and these two have this crazy chemistry that's just really fun. And the first time I read it though, I absolutely love Stolen Air, and I was like, meh, it's okay, it's fun. Literally my review was like, I've read better, not the best. And I remember skimming a lot of this book the first time. I wasn't totally into it, and I was very excited for Bloody Heart at the time, and so I only gave this like a 3-star. I reread this book back in I think February or March, right before The Savage came out, because The Savage is about the daughter of these two characters, and I liked it a lot more. I actually bumped it up to like a 4.5 for 2 reasons. One, I just really appreciated Nero and Camille more, and this one is a bit of a breath away from the rest of the Mafia stuff, which if you're in for a Mafia series too, this could also be a bit of a speed bump, pun intended, because you're like, I don't know how I feel about this. But upon reread, there's such great stuff with the Gallo family, right? Is it Nero Gallo? Yes, it is. Sorry. Yeah, there's so much good stuff with like Ada being a young mom, and we're seeing like Dante, and we're seeing the interactions happen like that, and I just love that because it's really showing these two families getting like closer and closer, and I loved that. So when I reread this one, I just appreciated it a lot more, and I'm also much more of a Sophie fangirl, obviously. And then the other Sophie that I've changed my mind a lot about actually is The Heir. So this is the first Kingmaker book, which I did not know what to expect with this one. And this is Sophie's first, and I think currently only, friends to lovers, because Leo and Anna, they were non-biological but practically cousins, and so they've grown up their whole lives together. Anna's father is Miko and Nessa, or like that's her parents, Miko and Nessa, and Leo's parents are, I can't talk, are Sebastian and Yelena from Heavy Crown. So we go from Heavy Crown and then we start The Heir right here. And they just have a very interesting like friends to lovers. Like they haven't really seen each other as anything else. There's maybe they've noticed at different times, but it's when they get to Kingmakers and there's really like all this drama happening at Kingmakers, and there's enemies popping up and all these things, and the conflicts really start between them in ways that they've never really had before, and they just really get off track. So like it goes from friends to lovers to like, I wouldn't call them going into enemy, but they get off track from some meddling from other people, and it's not great for their relationship, you know? But so when I first read this one was a 3, and I was like, like this was so boring. These characters were so frustrating. I'm so annoyed with them, and stuff like that. And then when I reread this book, which I want to reread again soon because I want to reread the audiobooks of Kingmakers. I just don't know when I'm going to have time for that. Like, I have no idea when I have time for that. But all the audiobooks for these are out now, and I want to, well, I think The Savage isn't out yet, but anyway, I reread this, and to see how Sophie set everything up going through the spy and the things she was laying in place. Like, these are all my notes from like the different hints that I saw and the different things that I loved about it when I reread it, and I just saw how talented she is and how great it was. And so this one definitely went up for me. It's still not my favorite in the series. Like, it's still my least favorite in this. Well, it's not true, because I don't love The Savage. But of those original like the first four in this series, this one's still my like least favorite. But considering that I gave The Rebel 5 and both The Bully and the Spy 6 stars, this one went up to like a 4, 4.5 for me, and I appreciate it so much more. All right, then we have another one that, this one was more about contemplation, why this one went up in my mind, and that's going to be Vanquish by by Pam Godwin. So I have the bind-ups of the Deliver series, sorry, because there's 9 in this, and Vanquish is actually the book that like kicks off the rest of the series. So Deliver is first, but Pam always meant Deliver to be a standalone, and if you've seen the interview on my channel with her, you can go check that out. She just wanted Deliver to be a standalone. She was writing a lot of like standalones in different like subgenres of dark romance at the time, and then she wrote this, and there was a character in it named Van, and he was the villain, kind of, sort of. He was, you'll know if you read it. He does lots of villainous things, and he's kind of sort of a villain in that one, and I mean, he's still kind of sort of a villain in the second one. But something happens to him in the first one, and Pam cried, actually. And her husband is like, why are you crying about this? And she's like, I don't like what happened with Van. And he's like, well, fix it. And what she writes about Van in Vanquish is what leads to the rest of the series. It gives her the idea, and it pushed it on to be the amazing Deliver series that it is. And so, I mean, the first time I read it, I did enjoy it. Again, this is one of just like how I think about it. And I mean, that is what this video, romances I changed my mind about. And it wasn't until more and more of my friends were reading it, because this was a series that I kind of like taste tested first for a lot of my friends, because we'd heard it was her darkest books. And like, if you've read other Pam, like, you know, she goes dark anyway. So I was kind of like taste testing the way through this for people. And so many of them, like, Vanquish is their favorite in the series. And in speaking about it with them and picking apart Van's character, and the heroine's name just went out of my head to, I forgot what her name is. Bloop. I don't remember what her name is right now. Ooh, nope. Anyway, it doesn't matter. I just have grown to love this book even more. So that's one that I reread it when Crystal read it for the first time, and we had so many great discussions about it. So Pam Godwin she's definitely an author to have book clubs about, guys. Like, she's fantastic. And then I want to talk about OReilly's earlier stuff. So before I show you which books that I've changed my opinions on, I first want to be clear that I have not and will not ever change my mind about Twisted Emotions and Twisted Pride. Those two books are in my favorite books of all time. They're like some of my favorite mafia of all time, and I don't see them being dethroned anytime soon. I don't think that OReilly has done better than them, and I don't know if she ever will, but I will always love those. Some books that upon rereading them didn't work for me as well is going to be, now I'm going to show the first one and then I'll talk about the last one. It's going to be actually the first one, Bound by Honor, in the context of what Bound by Love does. So if you don't know what she did, she wrote like 5 of these that were all about like different couples in the mafia world. Honor, duty, hatred, temptation, vengeance. Those are all about different couples. Then she came back around and she wrote Bound by Love and Bound by the Past. And she revisited Arya and Luca in Bound by Love as well as Bound by the Past. Now, I don't even own these books anymore because I like got rid of books 2 through 8 because I just had no desire to reread them again after I reread them. And I think the thing for me is that while I still recommend this as an intro to Mafia in a lot of aspects, I now like don't feel quite the same way, because it's an intro to Mafia for a certain type of Mafia, if that makes sense. A certain type of heroine who is shivering in her boots, who very much has had the men controlling her whole life, which granted, that's going to happen in Mafia romance. So let me be clear, that's going to happen. But what I like more about heroines in Mafia now is that they've grown up like that, like Arya did, but they haven't let it make them that way. And for me, Arya is someone who completely let it make her that way and is so naive. It's like she didn't even try to pick up anything around her. And she also, once she's in love with Luca, which, you know, this book is them falling in love, when we get to Bound by Love, you know, somehow Luca's fallen for this naive, foolish woman that he was in this, you know, arranged marriage with. And she like goes out of her way almost to make his life difficult. And it's painful to behold a lot of times. Like, I'm not even kidding you. The amount of shit that Arya gets Luca into that threatens his business, that threatens the family as a whole, is just so frustrating. I can't even tell you. Like, my rereads of those, like when I first read them, they were like 5 stars because I loved seeing more. But when I reread those, I was like, Arya, you're a stupid bitch, man. You're a stupid bitch. And it was hard to put the veil back over my eyes. So I couldn't even tell you what I like rate those now. I don't really recommend them when I do Intro to Mafia anymore. Sometimes I still do, depending on like the person, because I think they're a good intro to Mafia for seeing how a Mafia system can be set up with enemies and with like, you know, showing you how like you can fall for different heads of the Mafia, you know, because as you read through her world, you get to see Luca and Dante and Remo. And I also still recommend it if it's a friend who wants the full backstory of a world, because for me to get the full punch out of twisted emotions and twisted pride, I like people to start at the beginning. And these books, you can get through them very quickly, but that's pretty much the only times that I still do. Okay, where else are we going? Let's do 2 more that I changed my mind downward for, and then we'll end with one that I've like raised my opinion. We'll do that. So I have 2 Julia Quinn that I want to talk about. And these, again, I want to be clear that I read these when I was 15 and 16, and I don't condemn these books at all. Like, I don't. I've just changed my opinions about how easily I love them, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. You know, I don't think that there is. And I mean, if you've been around at all, you know that I'm an OG Julia Quinn stan. I just actually think I understand these books more at the level of like what she meant us to than, you know, than what I understood at the time. So the first one that I've slowly changed my opinion on over time, and I promise you, this one isn't in a bad way. Like, I mean, I have more like complex feelings about it now, and all the discussions that have been had over the different times I've read it in my life. And so it just doesn't have the same inhibition of like loving to read it as I did then. Does that make sense? Like, I can't just read this book and detach it from all those conversations anymore. So it's not as freely loved. Does that make sense? I feel like that's what I'm trying to say, is that I had a childlike love of this book and I don't anymore. Okay? And that's The Duke and I. And I do have an original hardback, and it is one of the books I would take with me in a fire, that's for sure. So I don't have the same like carefree love of it anymore. Have I had some of the best conversations ever? Yes. Is it still one of my favorite historical romances of all time? It is. But again, it has so many strings strapped to it now for me, from, you know, the TV show being what it was, and the discussions of consent and the back and forth with people if they think that makes it trash or if it doesn't. And I've had to like defend the book when like it's not my job to defend a book, but also like it brings up so much about what old school historicals were and how like authors were using consent in books as a point before people understood that's what they were doing. And so they tend to be like, oh, this author had rape in this book. And it's like, no, this author had dubious consent lines that had been crossed in a book. And that was the point. Like, that was the point. And at the time, people just like didn't say anything because they were reading it in his old schools all the time, whereas Julia Quinn was making a point with that. So yeah, so this is one I've changed my mind about over time. And this one isn't in a bad way, like at all. I never thought there would be so many complex conversations to have about this book, which I just saw as a fun, quippy, you know, marriage of convenience. Hero has like a messed up daddy issues. Like, I just didn't expect what I was getting from it, you know? But one in the series that I have changed my opinion of for the lesser, and not because I think Julia Quinn did a bad job, but more so because I just dislike one of the characters now so much. Like, I dislike him so much that it's taken a lot of the joy out of the book. And I actually, like, this was the first one that I started, well, no, I did annotate The Duke and I, but I had annotated that at a different time. And I was getting so upset with him that I was like, I have to just write in this book all over. So that's actually an offer from a gentleman. And I know, this is some of people's favorite. They love Benedict and Sophie. This one's a Cinderella retelling. I actually finally found an original paperback with a step back, because not all of the hardcovers came with a step back on the back. They just weren't made that way. Because I do have first editions of all of these, and they don't all have that. But I just think he's such an entitled, spoiled bitch boy who tries to coerce Sophie into being his mistress. And I still love Sophie so much, y'all. I love her. She, like, it really is a Cinderella scenario. Like, she had a loving father. Her father married a stepmother who had 2 daughters. And when her father died, she was a bastard daughter of her father, and he always let her live at the home, and like, he would still do fun things with her, he would still be kind to her. But the stepmother, because she was so beautiful, the stepmother hated her and turned her into a servant and said that she would be sent out, and like hides her inheritance from her and everything. And she ends up sneaking out to a ball one time. There's the Bridgerton ball, and she meets Benedict. She's wearing a mask, she's dressed up beautifully, she goes to this ball, they like kiss at midnight, and she runs away to get back, and then she gets caught and they kick her out with nothing. And so she becomes like, I think she tries to become, she's not able to be a governess, but she tries to do different things, and because she's so beautiful, she really kind of gets hounded by men wherever she goes. And then she ends up like at this, she's working a event at this house where she is like about to get assaulted again, and Benedict sticks up for her and he takes her away. So he's doing so good, right? He's doing so good. He's way up there. Great job. And he ends up getting sick, though, like on the way, like it's raining when they leave. He ends up getting sick, and he's able to take her to, he has his like small country home, isn't far from this place where he was at a house party. So he brings her there, and he's ill now when he gets there. And so Sophie, along with his like maid and her husband who like work his small house, they like help nurse him back to health, and they start falling for each other. Well, he's doing this, and she knows who he is, but he doesn't know who she is. And before he even knows that she's his Cinderella woman, like, he is waiting for that woman. And so the woman that he dreams of and that he draws pictures of and that he wants to be with, he's like, I can't marry anyone else because I'm waiting for this woman. But I could mess around with this maid who literally, that's the reason she hasn't had a safe place to stay all this time, is because men keep trying to sleep with her. And then Benedict wants to do the same thing. And there's a lot more to it, and it's all very frustrating because he's like, I can't marry this like bastard daughter. Meanwhile, like his family, he's not the first or even the second. He's the second son. Sorry, was counting the books. He's the second son. His brother is married and has 4 kids. 4 kids now. Like, he's not going to be the heir. Like, it doesn't matter who he would marry, and his family doesn't care. But he has it so stuck in his head that he's looking for one certain person that he's even willing to like coerce her into being his mistress, or else he accuses her of stealing. Like, he just spirals out of control. And like, some people say he has a good grovel at the end. When I reread this, he fucking doesn't, okay? He does one little heroic thing, and she's like, oh my God, he rescued me. It's his fucking fault she's in there. Anyway, do I have anger towards Benedict? Yes. Do I love Sophie and want to protect her at all costs? Yes. That's why I wish she wasn't with Benedict. I get over it eventually, I promise. But the times that I reread this, and the last time that I reread this, I literally was so furious with him that I couldn't enjoy their HEA because he made me so mad. Like, it made me so mad. But I know other people don't agree. I know they don't. I know for some people he's their favorite, and that's fine. But I changed my opinion because this used to be in my top like 3 Bridgertons, and now it's literally at the bottom. There's like, it's at the bottom for me because I hate Benedict so much. Okay. This video still ended up being super long. My voice is gonna go out. All right, and the last one that I changed my opinion on for the better, even though it's still splitting hairs about which book in this series is my favorite, the book that I changed my opinion on is Dragonfly Amber by Diana Gabaldon, right? I know, and I changed it for the better. So I first read this book after, you know, watching, so, okay, we don't have time for this, Jen. When I first got into Outlander, it was through the TV show. I watched the first half of season 1 on DVD before I didn't even have internet in my new apartment. So I went to Barnes & Noble and bought some movies and DVDs, and Outlander was the thing I watched. So season 2, the second half of season 1 was out, but it wasn't out on DVD yet. So I could only watch the first 8 episodes. And when I got to the end of the first 8 episodes, right, there's a cliffhanger. Claire is being like stripped naked by Randall, and he's going to rape her, and Jamie bursts in, and then it ends. And I was like, oh, fuck, I got to finish it. So I bought the book. The first book, literally started the book where that happened and read through it. Then I went back to the beginning and finished it. And then I had to pick up this book. Now, this book is a big reason why a lot of people never start the series. Some people might have now because of it. But I remember years before hearing about Outlander, because Outlander's been around since before I was born, obviously. And I saw that this book said 20 years later, and I hate time jumps, and I hate being separated from our love, and I was like, fuck no, I'm not going to read a series where there's a 20-year gap. However, I was then maybe a little more mature, and I was like, well, I'm going to keep watching the show anyway, so I might as well read the book so I can prepare for it. Not realizing that we're ahead 20 years, but then we get to go back and see what happened for them. Like, that's the thing that's really jarring, and my friends who like still don't know anything about the series, which good on you for being able to stay clueless all this time. They're always like, what? Why is she in the future 20 years later? And I'm like, just keep reading. It doesn't take that long before we go back to find out. Like, it doesn't take that long. So we then go back to where we left off at Outlander, and we see Jamie after he's been assaulted by Jack Randall, and Claire is pregnant, and they need to go to Paris to escape from all that. And then they're going to try to help the Jacobite rebellion, because Claire's like, you know what? I'm going to be stuck here. I'm staying with you. I choose to be with you. Let's see if we can change history. So the first time I read this book, I definitely didn't hate it, because I know it doesn't work for everyone. I mean, it does obviously work for a lot of people, because hundreds of thousands, probably millions of people have read these books. So it does work for some people. But I know for some people, like, the way that she tells a story doesn't always work for people, and I do. The way that she writes these stories for me literally makes me feel like I share a soul with these characters. Like, I feel so entrenched in their lives in such a beautiful way. It's something special that I just, yeah. It's something special that I just can't quite explain. But anyway, the first time that I read this, I definitely was rushing through this book. I was like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? I know this is going to happen. And I get so anxious. It's part of the reason why I like to only read romance, okay? And while this does have a central romance plot and eventually many more romance plots going along, it still is a historical fiction slash like historical fantasy fiction more than anything else. And though I do believe in my soul of soul that Jamie and Claire get their HEA and are living it to a lot of respects, like through the series, like they're together, this book was the most painful because we know that something happens where she's gone for 20 years and that she has a red-haired daughter who looks a lot like Jamie Fraser and not like Frank Randall. And we know that, like, so we don't know how that happened, but we know it's gonna fucking hurt. So I definitely rushed through this book more the first time. And it wasn't until a few years later when I did my big reread, that's when I did all these notes, that I saw all these hauntingly beautiful, beautiful things. And like, just page after page, like when I annotate a Diana Gabaldon, it takes me so long because I'm literally highlighting everything while I read. Like, it's fantastic. So when I reread this book, and now I know, you know, like I know where it's going, I know where we're ending up, I'm able to sink into it and just appreciate the journey that they're going through, because they both have a lot of trauma, specifically Jamie. The way that Diana deals with male sexual assault and like the trauma of it, the PTSD, the questioning your masculinity and your strength and your mental health. Like, I've never read anything that dives into it quite like this that was a fiction. You know, I am flabbergasted by what she's able to do. And a lot of people look at this series and they're like, oh, this is a bunch of like rapey history. And I'm like, okay, when you lay out all the books and the thousands and thousands of pages, it's not like rape makes up a significant portion of them. Are there assaults happening often? Yeah, but they're not all the same level as what happens to Jamie, and they're not all the same like life ending. They're more, I mean, honestly, they're more like, this happened, how do we go through it? And when Diana's characters are put in some of these painful places, some of the most beautiful things happen. So this is a book I would take my opinion on. Whew, so there we go. This was going to be a quick video, and it is over 40 minutes. So there you go. You're welcome. I hope you enjoy this. Like I said, please subscribe to this channel and hit the like button if you enjoyed this content. Tell me some books you've changed your opinion on. Do you agree with some of my thoughts on some? Do you, like, I don't know. I don't know. That's what I have to say about this one. Thank you so much for watching, y'all. I'll see you next time.